Alfred Hitchcock is a titan of cinema. His ability to pick a quality story, cast it perfectly, shoot it with unparalleled skill, and market it in an irresistible way has rightfully cemented his legendary status. Throughout his 61-year career, he directed more than 50 films, a handful of which are still recognized not only as some of the finest suspense films ever, but among the greatest motion pictures in history. Despite this, he never won Best Director, and only ever directed 4 movies that were up for Best Picture. Of those 4, only one ever won this highest honor, and it isn't even one of the movies he's best known for today. Is it a forgotten classic, or a rightfully dismissed product of a bygone era? Let's find out. This is the Best Picture winner from 1940, Rebecca. The Technical. You might have noticed that after the lush colors of Gone with the Wind in 1939, we're back to good old black and white in 1940. In fact, we won't be seeing color again until 1951. However, when it comes to Rebecca, this was an intentional decision. Prior to Gone with the Wind, the lack of color in movies like Cimarron, Cavalcade, or Mutiny on the Bounty was a technical limitation. Arguably, Rebecca feels like the first movie in this series that needs to be in black and white. The movie has a very distinct mood, which plays off light and shadow to build the suspense. Hitchcock definitely knows his way around a shot, with close-ups and wide shots played against each other to establish the exact intended feel for every event. The music is generally well suited to each scene, though with some of the more dramatic turns, the music does feel like it's trying to lead the audience more than a little bit. This wasn't unusual for movies of this era, but it unfortunately serves to distract rather than enhance the action. The writing. Rebecca is based on a book of the same name by Daphne du Maurier. Du Maurier had a long, lucrative relationship with Hollywood, with several of her books being adapted for the silver screen, including 2 others from Hitchcock. Of the many adaptations of her works, she considered this to be the best, though as we saw with Gone with the Wind, a movie can be too faithful to the source material. Fortunately, Rebecca toes the line, keeping what's important without relying too much on fluff. The result is a lean, suspenseful script about a young woman who marries a widower, only to find herself living in the shadow of the first wife. This is emphasized by the fact that the main character is simply known as Mrs. De Winter, a fact carried over from the book. The namesake of the movie is the deceased first wife, who is dead well before the start of the movie. She is never seen in flashback or pictures, and it's nearly an hour and a half into the 2-hour-long movie before we even get a physical description of her.
She stood there laughing, her black hair blowing in the wind.
Everything prior to that is vague, idealistic, and nondescript. This, gimmicky though it may sound, makes the late Mrs. De Winter seem like a more dominating force in a subtle but very effective way. The movie wastes little time, moving forward from point to point at a steady pace. It takes less than a half hour for Maxim and Mrs. De Winter to meet, fall in love, and get married without feeling any more rushed than it needs to be. Then it's on with the meat of the story, which continues on at a decent clip for the duration, with little in the way of wasted downtime. It's a dark movie, but the writing is so compelling I couldn't help but keep watching. The acting. The heavy lifting in the movie is done by Laurence Olivier as Maxim De Winter and Joan Fontaine as Mrs. De Winter. Fontaine, as I mentioned earlier, is never given a first name, but she plays the role so earnestly, so innocently, that it didn't occur to me until later that I never learned her first name. She starts the movie as a wide-eyed, innocent girl who is swept along on a seemingly fairy tale adventure. Throughout the movie, she goes from innocent and naive to hurt and betrayed by the seemingly insurmountable comparisons to Rebecca, to a very dark place after a pivotal plot point that I won't spoil here. Suffice to say, she manages the very sharp character arc with a natural grace that is a thing that Hollywood legends are made of. On the flip side, Laurence Olivier is less fantastic. That's not to say he's bad, though first impressions of his performance are a bit stilted and forced. As the movie progresses, though, that aspect of the performance makes more sense, as a widower haunted by the specter of his late first wife. The performance only helps the feeling that something is wrong on the De Winter estate. Still, when it comes to a legendary performer like Laurence Olivier, I expected something a bit more engaging. And even when all the cards are on the table and there's nothing left to hide, Olivier never feels like he's fully devoted to what he's doing. The supporting end is much more consistent, with the two main supporting actors, Judith Anderson as Mrs. Danvers, and George Sanders, yes, that George Sanders,
It's me, Shere Khan,
as Jack Favell. Anderson turns in a chilling performance as the housekeeper who is still hopelessly devoted to Rebecca. Her cool, blank facade is just thin enough to be able to see the raw contempt for Rebecca's replacement, and the few times she drops the mask completely are truly chilling. Sanders is far less insidious, as a relative of Rebecca who is out to exploit the waning relationship between his family and the De Winter fortune. While he never reaches the evil heights of Mrs. Danvers, he still proves to be a worthy adversary to the newlywed De Winters, especially in the second half of the movie. Of course, that smooth, purring bass voice does nothing but enhance the villainous character, and that British charm that Sanders was so well known for fits the character like a glove. Rebecca has sadly been lost among the more popular movies later on in Alfred Hitchcock's career. It lacks the more quotable lines or instantly identifiable imagery, but the movie truly does stand on its own. Its twisted story, with some truly chilling performances, makes for a truly memorable theatrical experience. While it may not be as dark as Psycho or Rear Window, and it is almost tame by today's standards, the movie's atmosphere is so engrossing, I was dragged in for the duration. Enough so that I wasn't concerned with comparing it with this movie or that movie. It stands alone. The cinematography, the characters, the script, they are all on par with his later box office hits, making this a worthy addition to any Hitchcock fan's collection. How green was my what now?